Everybody's having a fantastic Saturday. If you're watching this, then chances are your Saturday did not quite go as you had hoped. So anyway, it's kind of weird coming up with topics for the show, and it was kind of a weird thing to bring up a topic that I really haven't talked a lot about, at least not in depth, at least not in detail. I'm constantly yammering on about drag racing. It all has to do with racing on a drag strip. But as most of us, kind of gonna start doing other things. What's up, CFL? Doing good? Mark Coley on the house. I like it. Got the arm flexes. So wanted to chat about that and, kind of bring y'all into the fold. Me circa, 1997 through, 2006, give or take. Nice 9 or 10 year run floating around in there. Basically that's almost all I did. Aside from SCCA stuff, I was going to the drag strip, but I really wasn't going to the drag strip the way that I am now. I'd go about once a month, but just mainly to go out there and have some fun and eat a chili pie. But the main fun that I was having on the weekends was roll racing. And I got into it primarily because, well, to be honest with you, street racing, although it was a lot of fun, I wasn't really hooking up given the cars that I was running around in. And, once I got into the Viper, or Vipers, I should say, let's keep it real here. It was just a whole different game at that point. But what I wanted to do is kind of roll this thing back even further than that. You know me, I'm not one to ever shy away from the sound of my own voice. And so this is going to be another one of those cases. And I wanted to bring up some things and talk about a couple of topics. One is a lot of old timers don't like the roll racing, which is hysterical because when I was a kid, one of the things my granddad loved to do, he's an ex-race car driver, was to roll race. He had an El Camino SS. And he did some of that stuff. It was, the passing gear. Back then it was 30 to however fast your car would go, but it was basically that 30 punch. And if it hooked, great. But the idea was just, these cars weren't going to hook. These were crappy old street tires. These were guys that, had remembered a lot of the old, mechanics videos and things like that, where they would show and sales demonstration videos where they would show, say, whatever car, the passing capability, and they would roll those two cars at about 20 or 30 miles an hour, slam the pedal down, and then watch whichever one would walk away from the other. See how the Chevelle will outrun the whatever car it could have been, Mopar, Dodge, Ford, doesn't matter. You get the idea. And that was a metric, by the way, that they used to test. And that was even before there was quarter mile racing. It was the passing test. Can it get around that 18-wheeler on a hill? A lot of folks were drag racing from a roll back then. So, the whole drag racing thing, yeah, it's a great deal. Running from a dig, that's all fine and good. But man, I got to tell you, a lot of these cars nowadays just don't do a great job of really doing anything from a dig. I got one sitting right back there, as a matter of fact. So, at least not on the street. Now, on the drag strip, completely different story. Which is where you start to find a little bit of the separation. Folks will say, oh, hit me from a dig. I don't want to go from a roll, usually Mopar guys. No, hit me from a roll. Dig sucks. Vet guy. It's just the way that they work out. Each platform has its strengths and weaknesses. So, it's funny. You'll hear guys, I walk away from 392 cars all the time, but you get them next to each other on a drag strip and they're chasing down that 392, normally to only run out of real estate before they can get around them. So, at any rate, just wanted to kind of bring y'all into the fold. Some of the things that I used to do, the setups on the cars that I used to run. And, just visit with you guys kind of on that topic, because, man, as much as I love going to the drag strip, man, my heart's still kind of in roll racing in a way. In fact, my C5 Z06, that was its bread and butter. I used to go sniping after Hellcats, primarily before a lot of the secrets got let out of them. But yeah, I would go just absolutely destroy Hellcats with my C5. And it was just a naturally aspirated LS6 with a cam, a little bit of that scrubby scrub on the intake manifold, long tube headers and a tune, and a Veraram intake. So, go figure. But that thing would absolutely put a scalding on your garden variety Hellcat. And then as things evolved and cars started getting faster, this is where we ended up. But it's funny how I wound up with a C5 Corvette. So let me go back to story time. Back in the day, this is again 97, 98, 99, 2000, basically up through 2006-ish. The nastiest cars that were out on the roll circuit were some LSs, but not a ton. LS was just kind of coming into the fold here. But in around 2002, 2003, 2004, you had some real nasty LS6 Corvettes. Obviously, the Vipers were in the mix. You had the Supras, which the Supra was kind of your garden variety, top dog of the food chain in terms of roll racing, depending on how it was set up. Then you had the Porsches, the GT2s, and the turbos, just the all-wheel drive turbos were also in the mix. I think those were all Rentecs. You had some E55s, believe it or not, the precursor to the Hellcat, sneaking in there with Westech tuning, Westech kits, things like that. So there was a lot of different types of cars out there, including LT1 cars with blowers and nitrous. Those were some, there was a Trans Am that was running around at the time. Couple of Vets that would fall into that bill. Those were the cars that we were running up against. I was in the Viper camp, and the funny thing is that all of them were pretty even. But let me just kind of tweak things a little bit for you, because back when we were doing this, it was all 30 to something until the power level got to around, really once the power level started to get around that 600 horsepower, 700 horsepower to the rear wheels. That's when the speed got bumped from 60 to 165, or guys would go 100 to 200 miles per hour, just depending on the level of build that they had. But it wasn't uncommon to see guys with, Viper heads cam with no nitrous, just crushing it with, 60 to 160 hits. And that's what the primary runs were, all 60 to 160. And that's just basically what we did back then. Today it's more 60 to 130, and I can kind of understand that. A lot of the NA stuff, I can get that it just takes a minute to get there, but the NA stuff today is pretty darn fast. I mean, every bit as fast as the stuff that we were working with back in the day. But we were all working with tire technology that really wasn't all that awesome. And I'm reminded of a few times hazing the tires at about 140, 150 miles an hour in that Viper. And of course, I was hitting it with either a 250 or a 300 shot. So, you deal with what you got, right? But anyway, we had a lot of fun with those cars back then. And again, that's just kind of the stuff that we were into. The fun thing was, you start getting, I think it was, Rentec, I think was who it was with the Porsches. But anyway, you start getting a lot of these guys that were just crazy about doing these big triple digit numbers. It was kind of nuts back then. So a little bit of the Wild West, but not too far removed from where we're at now. And of course, tire technology's evolved since then. Although I don't recommend them for the job, ET Street R's, the Mickey Thompson ET Street R's had seen, I don't know how many guys run 30 to 130, which really is a little bit safer route to go, I suppose. But, I know guys that are actually hazing those things now too. So anyway, I was running on, I was running on Bogarts with a bias ply setup all the way around on the Viper, by the way, 26 1050 ET Streets with like M&H Racemaster fronts. I mean, it was not the safest thing in the world to do, but yeah, I kind of miss it in a way, but you know, I've got responsibilities now and I can't get caught playing too much, but I will say that I have a riot with Revlon. So anyway, let me check in with everybody real quick, and then I'll keep yammering on about the good old days. See, R-Stage3 saying, B-Max, what's up, man? What's up? Real Counterfeit saying, Brother Max, what's up, Real? Ashley Mills in the house saying, roll racing is still a lot of fun. Yeah, it is. I'd say it's even funner now because, you know, the platforms are a little bit safer. You've got some nannies in play that you can kind of rely on with some of these cars. But, you know, once you start getting into the big power numbers, those nannies all get turned off anyway. So back to old school, right? Real Counterfeit saying the Hellcats love big end, not near as much as the Vets do, or the 5.0s for that matter. And that's, if I were to build another, like, just roll race contraption. So I was thinking about this the other day. If I were to do it again, I'm kind of torn between modern Coyote and then going Turbo LS or Turbo either way, actually, is the way that I would go. But man, I don't know. It'd be kind of tough. It'd toss up either way. Both of them would be pretty nasty. Dr. Div saying, what up, B? What's up, Dr. Div? Some Ferrari guy saying, building my 5.0 for rolls. Yep. Oh, man, that'd be a fun setup. And I know the guys are doing a good job with the 5 liters too. The best thing about that is that you can spin them to the moon, and really in the roll racing arena, that's really what you need. You need a lot of RPM. You need to be able to carry that RPM for a long time. And that's where those cars do a real good job. Dr. Div saying, dig a roll, I'm down. I like it. Let's see. Oh, Dr. Div saying, I like a good 50 to 130 or 150 run. After that, I'm pretty good. I've had the tires come loose at almost 100 miles an hour. And I like my life too much. I got kids, but dig or die, of course. Well, you know, and that's the other thing. Tires are what they are. And even the best of tires, or even I should say with the best of tires, you can still find yourself in a pretty sticky situation. You know, all things said, you know, you get out here on the road, on the street where it's not a controlled environment. And this is one thing I wanted to bring up is, you know, one of the things that I noticed, that one of the spooky things that I've had happen again is, you know, having the tires haze at, you know, big number mile per hours. The thing is that the scary thing about that is you almost start to get used to it. A lot of times we were doing these races, or just runs, I should say. It really wasn't racing. It was just lining up and running the cars, but way out in the sticks. And that's all fine and good, but you know, if they'd recently mowed out there or something like that, you get some dust, debris, whatever on the road. Critters are another thing. Birds of all things. You know, we're doing these runs typically at about 3 o'clock in the morning, so it wasn't really any, you know, worry about certain things. But you know, you hit a possum or anything at, you know, 170, 180, 200 plus miles an hour. And, you know, what normally wouldn't be that big of a deal becomes a major deal. So, you know, just know that coming into it. Not to mention, if something does fail along the way, you're under power and there's a lot of real estate that you're going to need to woe that contraption. So, you know, I had some weird, I wouldn't say close calls, but just weird one-off situations. I had the Viper, on a 3-4 shift. I don't know if I hit some, this is in the ACR. I don't know if I hit a patch of like dust on the road or something, but on the 3-4 shift, I had the car start to step out, which really wasn't a big deal. You just kind of roll off the throttle and just kind of not go to slack throttle, but just roll off the throttle just a little bit. And the car just would not self-correct. And it got to a point where you're rolling off the throttle, and then it's, all right, party's over. And of course you clutch it at that point, and you know, the car did okay. It straightened itself out, but you know, when you're starting to get into this level of correction at about 115, things are getting kind of weird. And of course, you know, again, y'all know the story with Revlon. I mean, when I was out doing no prep hits with those DBRs, one of the issues is that tire is very, very soft. does a fantastic job on the drag strip. It's just not designed for the street, or should I say no prep conditions. And so they had feathered over pretty good. And, you know, I was out collecting data and the car got a little squirrely at about 128 miles an hour. So these are things that can happen on the street. So if you're thinking about doing this kind of stuff, far be it from me to tell you not to do it. In fact, I'm, you know, talking to a guy that did it. I mean, that was like what I did. I was just about that life. So there's a certain level of understanding that you have to have with your equipment, with the bit of kit that you have and all that. That's why I tell guys so often, you need to be out there practicing. You need to be out there honing your skills. You need to be out there learning the platform that you have. Don't just rely on the fact that you've got all the nannies. You think, oh, everything's going to be fine. Those nannies are great, but they can't warp the laws of physics in your favor. So just know that kind of stuff coming into it. And again, guys, just be careful out there. It's the main thing. Have fun, but be careful, you know. Modern Red Henry saying, "Sup, B, got the arm flex." Chuck Rice saying, "Hello, B, what's up, Chuck?" Donald Power saying, "Yo, Mr. Mason, what's up, Donald?" Let's see. Modern Red saying the Mustangs on the big end are ridiculous. Yeah, they are. Mix in a significant amount of forced induction and E85, and hopefully you've got a built trans to go along with it. Yeah, they are nasty on the big end. Let's see. CJ saying, "What's up, man? You shaved the beard?" Yes, I did. CJ's asking, "So B, what was your first car?" It was a Dodge 600 Turbo, which is a little ES. It's basically a K car with a 2-liter or 2.2 liter 2-valve overhead cam non-intercooled turbo, and I loved it. Front wheel drive thing would smoke the front tires until you took the foot off the gas. It was a lot of fun. Let's see. Modern Red Hemi saying, "Got some 17s with Mickey ET Street R's. First time running them tomorrow. If the weather holds out, you will love them." Yep, Sean's beat me to it. 23, 22 pounds and a big burnout launch at 1600. You will be good. Let's see. Blue Streak's asking, "Hey B, how's it going, brother? Do you know what the stock stall speed is in a 15 Ram 8-speed?" Interesting question, because you can stall them to about say 1600 RPM. I don't think that they'll go to 2000, but I don't know. I would say at the highest it'd be like 1800 RPM, but when you launch them, they will flash to about 2500 RPM. To put that in perspective, the 392 cars will all hang like right there at 3000 RPM. So it just kind of gives you an idea the difference between the two. But in terms of stall speed at that power level, because you have to remember stall speed is based on power level, I want to say they'll stall around, 16 or 1800 would be the highest I would think that would be. Let's see. Rift is asking, "Is the 262 better than the 309 diff for roll racing in a Hellcat?" Sean's saying no, the 309 will trap a higher speed. That is true. The 309 will get you to, say, 140 miles an hour quicker. It'll certainly get you to 135 miles an hour more quickly. That's basically where you're going to run out of RPM. So, yeah, as long as you've got a sticky tire and you're not racing from anything less than 60 miles an hour, you'll be just fine. Anything less than that, you're going to need a good sticky tire, because they will have a tendency to try to light the tires up if you don't. Let's see. Chuck saying, "I was following your recommendations for tachometer sweet spots, 5800 RPMs. B, it definitely works with my RT Plus shaker 6-speed with 93 octane, but in 4th gear, I was well over 100 miles per hour. Sweetness." Very nice. That is the sweet spot for that setup. So keep it up. Keep practicing too. Practice, 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 practice. You'll get it down and you'll be very proficient with that. Just like any other thing that you do, just practice and you'll get it down for sure. Let's see. Real Counterfeit saying, "I like the 262 for rolls above 60. Thing is that the 309 hits at a real sweet spot at 60, and it carries through 5th gear nicely. And that's quite honestly what makes all the difference in the world. That 309 will allow 5th gear to not just with these Hellcats. And 262, fifth gear just kind of lays over. So with that 309, it allows it to just drag the living hell out of that gear up top, which makes it real nice. Let's see. Jimmy Chandler saying, "What's up, B? Got the arm flex. I like it." Chuck Rice saying, "Need to keep my cop eyes open." Yeah, you do. Cody saying, "What's up, B? Just got me a 2017 Ford Escape EcoBoost and having fun with it so far." Those are fun. I think that's that small SUV. I had one of those as a rental once, and I freaking fell in love with it. The only thing is I couldn't keep my foot out of it, so the fuel economy was terrible. But yeah, they are a lot of fun. Chuck Rice saying, "My first Mopar was a Dodge Shadow ESV6. 5-speed manual, was a fun car." Those were fun cars. Let's see. Oh, Rose saying, "That's what I'm saying. It seems like when I had my 262 diff, I was still able to do some roll races from lower speeds like 60. Correct. Let's see. Modern Red saying, "Full bolt-on heads, comp 270 cam, and Pro Charge with a 309 limited slip and a 3800 stall. What should I try to launch at?" Well, with a sticky tire, with a sticky tire, you should be able to launch it off of stall. I mean, you can stall it up as high as you want. You know, on the street, obviously, you're going to have to mediate the throttle in that respect. You know, load up the chassis, say at like 1200 RPM, then come off the throttle, off the brake rather, on the throttle, and just kind of modulate that power delivery. But on a prep track with a sticky tire, you should be able to just flat foot it and have that thing come out of the hole nice. So, yeah, I think you'd be in good shape with that setup for sure. Let's see. Oh, Rose saying, "Yeah, I was talking about roll racing on the street for sure." I'm not big into the roll racing at the track. I wouldn't mind doing some top end events. I'm just not going to do it with Revlon. Let's see. Dr. Div saying, "The Jeep SRT8 stock stall speed is a bit higher. It wasn't much of a difference, but it's like 2 to 2200. But just do a converter. If you're looking for a higher stall, Rams are 14 to 16. Well, there you go, depending on power. Very nice. HU37 saying, "What no one thinks about when roll racing is mechanical failure. The steering broke while my father was racing. Damn, he lost the use of a lung, partial use of an arm, and almost died. No street race for me." Modern Red, thank you very much, man. I appreciate the contribution very much. Thank you. Didn't have a question to go along with it, but thank you very much. I like it. Got the pair. Very cool. So that's one of the issues. You know, HU37 brings up a good point. The problem with street racing, and this is another big deal, is that you get away with it for a while. You know, the bigger issue for us, you know, with all the roll racing is that, you know, we were getting away with a lot of things for a long time, but every once in a while you hear about something bad happening. And typically, just like with anybody else, you think, it's not going to happen to me. It's not my, you know, it's not my time for a number to get pulled. But you know, you'd be surprised. And it's a lot of times it has nothing to do with somebody getting hurt. It's just simply a fact of the matter that, you know, that sometimes things happen on the street. You've got poor prep. Obviously, there's no prep. You've got dust, debris, fluids, and, you know, all this other stuff. You know, it's not a controlled environment, but you're driving at speeds that require a controlled environment for them to be safe. And you know, I'm not talking about 140, 150 miles an hour. I'm talking significant big numbers that you're trying to stay in the throttle as long as possible. That's when stuff breaks. And when it breaks in that respect, it typically is followed by rods coming out of engines and lots of fluids going everywhere. They're extremely slippery. So let's just say it's a bad idea to do that on the street. Although, again, you know, easy for me to say, you know, I was out there doing this kind of stuff, but you know, I guess one of the scariest things, like one of the things I will touch on is, guys have asked me, okay, when you're doing the 100 to 200 mile per hour runs, what's that like? And the only thing I can explain to you, first of all, you have to have the car set up for it. You have to have the right tires on the car. You've got to have basically a real strong working knowledge of how that car is going to react. Things like alignment come into play. The way that you're holding the steering wheel, you're not just up here like this. The lightest touch on that steering wheel, because you got to remember that, a slight input on the steering wheel at those speeds, that tire comes in just a little bit, depending on how much scrub you have. That slight amount moving that car is going to be a lot more force to move it, in any one direction. So everything's a real light touch. A lot of guys think you're like, and you're not. You're actually, the trick is that you want to be able to. What's funny is, guys, you want to have almost the lightest touch on the steering wheel, because you don't want to be tense either. You need your elbows to be able to flop around, which is true anytime you. If you ever take driving lessons from anybody, one of the first things I would tell noobs as an SCCA instructor, or acting as an SCCA instructor on, just normal autocross stuff for noobs, was these guys would get super tense, and you can't turn a steering wheel like that. You got to stay loose, you got to stay fluid, you got to stay kind of, basically able to react. And that's one of the things, is that what'll freak guys out the most is that they'll have twitchy inputs, and which will upset the car, and then they freeze up. That's the absolutely worst thing you can do. So basically, now I'm going to work in some of the tips on roll racing. So that's number one. Just know that being tense, being freaked out or something like that is not really what you want to have going on for you. If you ever notice in the videos when I'm doing these 60 to 130, or I'm doing something like, I'm data logging, I've got you guys along for the ride. If you ever notice, I'm just kind of chatting just the same way I'm chatting right now. There's no, oh my God, this is a thing. I mean, it's just when you've done this over and 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 over, you just don't really, it's just part of the gig, right? I mean, it's something you get used to, but it's easy to see why, guys, their adrenaline's pumping, they're going, their innards are going crazy. I get that. But the thing is, be calm. The more tense you get, the smaller your focus will be. This is a trait that you exploit, especially with boxing and striking. It's when guys are real amped up and they're freaking out, their field of vision is about as big around as one of those little cutie oranges. And if you're relaxed and you've been there before and you've seen all of this and you know what's going on, you've got this real wide field of vision. And that's what happens with a lot of guys. They get real worked up and they get real amped up and they have this tunnel vision effect. With cars, you don't really see target fixation, but you can. Motorcycles, you get a lot of target fixation, but I'll get into that separately. But anyway, the idea is to stay loose, stay focused, but just know that, you need to have your head clear and not be, really freaked out. Just know what you're doing when you're doing it. Keep your arms loose, keep your hands loose, all of that. Aside from the fact that you should have already nut and bolted the car like crazy, check your oil, check every fluid that you've got in the thing. Make sure you got plenty of gas. A lot of times more is better. You want that thing to be stable. And then check your bottle pressures if you're running nitrous. Ask me how I know. We had one guy, Viper guy, had a black with tan interior. GTS, real pretty car. And his car, what had happened was, I was still trying to figure this out, but he had a solenoid fail. Anyway, that car ended up burning to the ground on the side of Beltway 8. So, these things do actually happen. But again, this is not something to take lightly, but a lot of the things that will, get you from, wanting to do this to have you in the middle of doing it. That ego checks in. The biggest part here is don't let your ego write a check that your ass can't cash. More importantly, don't let your ego write a check that your skill set can't cash. It's kind of fun to try to bait somebody into a race, but if you know that they've never done anything like this before, or bait somebody into trying this stuff out, you don't go from, just the fastest you've ever been is 110 miles an hour in your mom's Accord to, cracking 140, 150, 160 overnight. Some cars will do that and sustain them like the Hellcat, real stable platform. it's almost like a cheating in a way, but you've got some cars that just really aren't that stable. And some of these older cars like the C5, the old school Vipers, they, you know, anything F body, they just weren't that stable. So you really had to drive those things. You had to know what was going on. So again, it was just that whole mode of practice, get out there, run the car, get used to it, figure out what's going to happen while you're at speed. So the typical training protocol, if you want to call it, was you just have a guy get out there and, you know, you basically follow the leader, and, you know, you start him off at about 110 and then, you know, ramp him up to say 120, and you just hold 120 for, you know, a full minute, maybe even 2 full minutes, just to make sure that the guy's field of vision would start to expand a little bit. And then you just ramp up the speed, you know, until 150, 160 miles an hour. The guys were starting to get pretty confident, but, you know, I'd have the guys just ride with me, and I'd say just know what to look for. You're looking at gauges, you're feeling the road and everything. That's what we would do with the guys. You know, if they wanted to try it, we'd just say you need to kind of build up to it, especially if you're going to be hitting it with a lot of boost or a lot of spray. It's not something you want to get out there and just do, but we would help guys along the way if they wanted to get into it. So, you know, our altruistic side kicking in, I suppose. One other thing that you have to know about once you start getting into those types of speeds, and again, 130s, I mean, dude, I mean, 130, these issues don't really start kicking in until about 150, 160 miles an hour. One thing is that, you know, I mentioned the deal about the steering, especially once you start getting above, I mean, it'll start to get like this above about 120, 130, but, you know, you start getting into the 150, 160 mile an hour range. Slight inputs can kind of redirect the car in ways that you might not expect. One thing I do want to touch on is, if you're driving down the road normally and you're cruising down the road and you feel like this dip, just, you know, like that, like the road just kind of goes like that. Nothing, I mean, like, you wouldn't notice it. In fact, the only time you would notice stuff like that is if you're dragging a real heavy trailer, right? But really, for the guys that are, you know, wanting to get into the go really fast stuff, those slight undulations in the road will do a couple of things. One, they can be jarring. They can, because you have to remember that the time that it takes to go across something that just kind of goes like that, if you're going 70 or 80 miles an hour, it's just like, yep. Well, when you double the speed, you double the force and you double the severity, or you probably do more than that. I'm sure there's some, you know, math you could do. Anyway, it jars you pretty good. Something that you may not even notice becomes real noticeable, and it's enough to where it can upset your chassis. So it's just something that you need to take into consideration. So, you know, make sure if you're going to do this stuff, the bottom line to this is make sure if you're going to do this stuff that you're doing it in an area where your surface is flat, your surface is clean, and that you've grown accustomed and you know and you feel, and you need to get real in tune with what it feels like to hit those slight undulations or slight rises in the road. Both can send your car completely out of whack. You can really upset the geometry of the car, upset the chassis completely, I should say, and can, you know, put you in a real precarious situation. So just know that coming into it, it's real important that I get that message across, because that's typically what ends up stinging guys. You're wide open. You think you've been down this road. I've been down this road 100 times, man. I know what's up. Yeah, you kind of do. Like if you're only going like 100, but you start ramping that thing up to 150, 160, 170 miles an hour. And now you've got some significant forces being applied to that vehicle as you go through that little undulation or that rise. And that's what can end up sending the car basically out of control. And that's also when, you know, you start to feel the car get a little bit loose anyway, because you're not setting these things up with aero and everything else for the downforce that you need to really make them safe. You know, if you guys are going out there, you know, basically with the plain car with no wings or anything like that, like realistically good wings, which I never had on my cars, by the way, but just saying, those things do help. in terms of just keeping the thing stable at those speeds. A lot of times you start to get the car get a little bit floaty. Definitely not a good feeling. Most modern cars, though, won't start acting stupid until about 165, 170 miles an hour. Riff saying, finally got some flames to shoot out the back of my Hellcat on E. I don't know if that's the best thing, but it looked cool. Nice. Again, Modern Red, thank you very much. Martin said, thanks for answering my question. Thanks for asking, man. I appreciate having you on, brother. Saying, I'll give it a shot tomorrow if it holds. Absolutely. Get out there and practice, man. Always, always practice. We're saying, if somebody pulls up next to me on the freeway, I'll usually do a little pull with them, but only if there's no cars around us. I used to go in and out of traffic when I was younger and a bit dumber. Yeah, true that. Me too. Every once in a while, me still. But I will say this. Yeah, I mean, hitting it, just playing around is still fun. But obviously pick and choose where you're going to be doing this kind of stuff, guys, because, the main thing is you don't want to hurt somebody else. You don't want to hurt yourself. Plus the financial repercussions can be significant, to say the least. So, obviously it's my part to say now, make sure that you're only doing this at sanctioned events like the Texas Mile. The Texas Half Mile event, stuff like that. Those are good environments because they're safer. You've got, medical personnel on tap if something does get weird, all that. But I get it. Those events are, few and far between, and they can be expensive. So, when it comes down to it, guys are going to run on the highway. If the guys are going to run, they're going to run. So, I'm just saying, look, if you're going to choose to do those things, you're going to want to choose to take all of your precautions coming into that decision. Chuck saying, I pick my pull spots to the safest areas I can find. Muscle cars can be dangerous. Know your limits, but work on your skills at the same time. And that's the thing. I mean, it's your skill set, your equipment, know your car. A lot of guys, what's funny about the crew that I used to roll with, man, we hung out at the shop. We did a lot of our own work. We knew the guys that were working on our cars. We had a great understanding of not only how to drive them, but what the limitations were based on the simple mechanics of the thing. So, and by the time we had been doing this for it didn't take long, but we had been doing this for a while, and we always were really safe, and we were lucky, I guess, more than anything else, to be able to get away with some of the stuff we're able to get away with. But I do know that there's folks that haven't. So, the risk is real, obviously. So just be safe out there. Let's see. White Knuckles asking, hey B, how's it going? What RPM should I set the short runner to activate with a 392 manifold on a 5.7? I would say 5,200. Depending on the cam, but I would say 5,000 to 5,200 is going to be the sweet spot for that. Rich saying, I got to almost 190 and afterwards realized that I had Mickey Thompson ET Street SSs on there, which I don't think was a good idea. Collection saying, two-step on a 392? You can. Let's see. If you're going to be launching it off of a two-step on a 392, I would say, depending on what kind of tires, what kind of prep on the surface that you're running. But yeah, I don't use a two-step with my stuff, but I mean, you could, I suppose. Dr. is saying stage 6 makes a good two-step for him. There you go. Let's see. Oh, Slash is saying, I'm doing what you suggested to make my scat pack louder after mid-muffler delete. Putting Dynamax race bullets in place of the mid-mufflers, then running pipes resonator delete. You'll like it. It'll sound good. Trust me. Real Counterfeit saying, know your street guys, don't race around unknown turf. Well, that's the thing. I mean, what you have to know is, again, know the area, but also here's the thing. Don't just know the road, know the area, know the environment that you're running in. Again, if it's near construction, don't do it because you're going to have construction debris, dust, dirt, things like that. Get on the road. in random spots. If it's in a dusty area, know that it is an area that's prone to get dusty, and that can create an issue for you. And it can create an issue for you at some pretty significant speeds. Obviously the list goes on and on, but you can kind of see where I'm going with this. You want to make sure that if you're out there doing this, that you not only do you know the road, know the environment that you're running in, and know the limitations. Here's another good one. If you're running in a somewhat wooded area, just know that those areas may have moisture on the road. We used to run into that up in Northern California with the bikes. Man, it was crazy because, you'd be just laying it, going through like La Honda and all this other stuff up there in NorCal. And, you wouldn't have, here's another thing, runoff. You'd have mountain runoff and dew runoff and things like that. It wouldn't have rained for 2 days. Most of the streets are dry, but some of the runoff is still coming down the mountain, and it makes this nice wet stripe right across the road, typically right on a freaking off-camber turn too. You get the idea. So anyway, back at it. Doc Div saying, yeah, Pops learned about that recently. He completely lost it with just a change in road conditions and a dip in the road. Messed the car up bad, short from being total, not getting out of it in time. Yep. And happens to the best of us. Slime Cutie saying, I started talking with my daughter about first car 2 years to go. I want to get her into autocross like I did and learn car control on the edge. I'm thinking older Miata or WRX. What other fun cars? Well, anything is a lot of fun when you're doing autocross. So it could be any contraption. But you're good and you're right to be having your daughters do this. I mean, my sisters all were extremely proficient in autocross running, and they ran it in Escorts, in Volkswagen, if it may have been a Volkswagen Rabbit in there. Anyway, they ran it in literally every car, any contraption, any daily that they had, they were running it out there. So from my perspective, I've seen guys with their kids out there in old Luminas. Anything you can drag out of a junkyard will work just fine, provided it's not leaking a fluid. And it's a great opportunity for the kids to learn proper car control, throttle control, how to look, where to look. All of that comes into play in autocross. So it's only going to make the kid a much better driver. If they find themselves in a funky spot, they'll be able to get themselves out of it. It won't be anything new to them. So yeah, absolutely good to do. But yeah, Miata's great. They handle fantastic, but give them something that handles like crap. Find an old Camry. If you really want to do it upright, throw them in a minivan. See my Pacifica review. Putting them in something that handles fantastic. I mean, yeah, I guess that's cool, but I don't know. I've always had more fun in stuff that shouldn't be on an autocross track. My Lightning, I would put on a show with the Lightning whenever I would drag it to the autocross track. So, just saying. Let's see. Jason's asking, 410s or 373s in a 92 Fox, 5-speed car, just put trick flow stage 1 heads, cam, and intake. I would go 373s. And the reason I would do that, tire size is kind of small for Fox bodies, and you just don't want to have the thing be too buzzy on the freeway. 410s are a little bit much. I had 390s in my coupe, and they were really borderline. They weren't great at the drag strip, but that was about it, and weren't that much better than 373s, if at all. So I've got 373s in Foxy, and I've actually thought about going down to 355s, mainly because they're just easier while you're driving down the highway. So whether that happens is yet to be seen, but nothing's going to happen until I get a clutch put in this thing, because that clutch got blown up. And fun fact, the first clutch or transmission that I ever removed was in my cousin's 86 Mustang GT convertible. And we did that on the ground. I can tell you, I ain't 16 years old anymore, and I'm not about to be doing that by myself in my garage. I've done too many of them on a lift, and I don't have a lift. At least, I can't get the car high enough really to do it here in the garage. I started toying around with the idea. Thought, you know what? I'm gonna bust out that old green wrench and let somebody else figure it out. I just got to find a shop down here that can manage that. But yeah, I was thinking, man, I got to swap that clutch out. And I thought, dude, you know what, man? My time is a lot more valuable than what it was back then. I'm going to let somebody that knows what they're doing, if I can find somebody down here, knows what they're doing and is going to do a good job. So that's what the latest plan is, by the way, for Little Miss Foxy. Doc Div saying, yep, knowing your group also, that's a good one. And the group gets better together over time. People learn from each other. Yeah, they do, as a matter of fact. Slide's asking, do you think 5-inch Craven muffler tips would sound good with race bullets? Yeah, I mean, it'd sound pretty good. I mean, they all sound good. I wouldn't hold it, I don't know that it would sound much different than the normal tips, but I mean, they're going to sound good either way with those bullets. But yeah, it's going to sound awesome. Riff saying he got his daughter a PT Cruiser for her first car. Hey man, nothing wrong with that. Listen, PT Cruiser's cool, and I'm telling you, you learn how to drive one of those things on an autocross track, it'd be a lot of fun. Doug is saying he's got a buddy that's got a BMW that he uses with his kids on autocross and drifting. He said that 15-year-old can handle that car better than or just as good as a professional driver. Definitely impressive to watch. Saying the kid can't drive on the road for shit with stop signs and traffic. Yeah, I can't either. Riff's asking, what do you think about a Dodge Avenger as a daily? Are they known for being good cars or bad cars? I don't honestly know enough about the Avengers. Most of all of them, here's the thing. The only downside to a lot of the Chrysler V6s is that with poor maintenance, they deteriorate pretty quickly. And it's something that I've noticed at least over the years. Now, the newer ones may be a little bit more robust, but I got to tell you guys, man, it's one of the, I mean, any engine without proper maintenance, obviously, right, is not going to do good. But the Chrysler V6s, for some reason, always seem to be a little bit more fragile than others. So as long as you're taking care of it, maintaining it properly, that whole routine, you'll be just fine with that thing. I don't think you'd have a problem with it. Again, it all boils down to maintenance, though. And that's the other side of really anything is, if you maintain pretty much any modern vehicle, if you maintain it really well, it's going to reward you with years upon years upon years of service, hundreds of thousands of miles. The car, so if we're talking about longevity, let me tell you a couple of the cars that still to this day blow my mind in terms of just being Methuselah contraptions, okay? First of all, any Ford 4.6 liter, it can be a 2-valve, it can maybe be a 4-valve also. But I can tell you this, man, or 5-liter, the weird thing, the old school Windsor 5-liter, Coyote too, but you'll see where I'm going with this. Back in the day when I lived in San Francisco, these freelance, they don't like being called gypsy cabs anymore, I guess, but the freelance cabbies, okay, these are guys that were cabs during the day, and then at night they would basically run around, and they had their retired fleet that were no longer capable of running passengers out of the airport, SFO. They would run around and pick you up and take you wherever you wanted to go. Basically, anywhere you wanted to go in the city for $75. And if it sounds like a lot of money, believe me, if you live on the peninsula, that is a smoking deal to go into town, find yourself in a whole lot of trouble, and then scrape yourself off the street, bloody and gross and climb in the back of an old town car and drag you home. Personal experience, that's all. Anyway, happened more than once. The fact of the matter is that these guys were super cool. And the retired fleet cars were always old. I say old, they weren't old, but town cars and Crown Vics and just cars like that. And it was not uncommon. I mean, you'd see odometers 500, 600,000 miles on these things. And you ask them, how the hell does that work? And they go, man, we just keep changing the oil. It's always had synthetic in it. We change it at 3,000 to 4,000 miles. The cars run every single day, and they just maintain the living hell out of them. And so, you know, if the water pump freaks out, you put another water pump on it at 250 or 300,000 miles, and you just kind of keep on going from there. So, but those were always the ones that blew my mind. I had never even heard of one that quit running for, you know, like a rotating assembly problem. These guys just kept changing oil in them and driving them. So there's that. I used to use Mustang GTs as my work cars, mainly because they were fun to drive, number one, but number two, incredibly durable, got good fuel economy. But I would drag these things on job sites. Basically, I treated them like a truck, but since I had to cover the cost of fuel, I was driving something that was a bit more economical than a truck. And, you know, if I needed to carry something, I had access to a truck if I needed it. So, but anyway, I would put, you know, 150, 200,000 miles on those things and not even bat an eyelash and just pick up a new one because it was about time to get a new car anyway. So anyway, that'll give you an idea. Sorry, I kind of got off on a tangent there. Let's see. Slime Q is saying, yeah, autocross is a blast. It's been probably 15 years since I did it. Looking forward to doing it again with the kids and teaching them. Yeah, and that's the thing. So for a lot of guys, so, you know, we're talking about, what's funny is that we're talking about roll racing, right? Roll racing. And, you know, that typically stems from drag racing, street racing, things like that. Here's the funny thing. When you get into autocross, and autocross will eventually lead you down the path of closed circuit, but should you choose to take it that far. But the funny thing is you get into autocross, and that is what gets a lot of guys off of street racing. Roll racing, maybe, but gets most guys off of drag racing. You'd be surprised how many guys will, you know, if you go to an autocross event and you start really getting into it, you'd be surprised how many guys say, yeah, I used to do a lot of drag racing. I used to do a lot of this, a lot of that. Now they're here. It's funny, almost like all roads lead to autocross. It's that much fun. Dr. saying, loved this 2014 Avenger. Oh, you got that, the whole thing got taken off. Oh, well, there he goes. Okay, so Rift is asking, also, what is the reason you need to change the oil in a Hellcat more often if you're running E85? Excellent, excellent, excellent question. So E85, number one, you have to run a lot more of the E85 to generate, let's say, X amount of power, 100 horsepower. There's just less energy in there. So because of that, you now have more mass in the cylinder. The ethanol, the way that the molecule is, can get past the rings a little bit easier and get into the oil and contaminate the oil. And you just have more of it in the cylinder as opposed to the 30% less amount of gasoline that you would typically have in that chamber to generate that same 100 horsepower. So a couple of things. You've got gasoline, larger hydrocarbon versus an ethanol molecule, again, smaller, gets past the rings easier, more contamination to the oil, and two, simply more of it to get past the rings for any specific power level. So because of that, you're going to have to change the oil more often just because it becomes more contaminated over time. That's basically it. The way you can boil that down is you just need to change it 30% more often than you would need to with gasoline. Again, you're using 30% more fuel for any single given amount of power that you use. So basically knock everything down by a third. So your owner's manual says to change your oil at 6,000 miles. Now you're changing it every 4,000 miles. And you can kind of just take that whichever direction that you can, that you can look at. Some motor oils will say this is good to 15,000 miles. Yeah. First of all, no, it's not. Your owner's manual would like to argue that point. And secondly, even if that were the case with the 85, okay, fine. You're going to need to chop that down by 5,000 miles now and change it every 10,000 miles. But, I wouldn't suggest that for these cars, especially the 85. Again, here's the other side of that. We're talking about any given power level. But if you're hammering on the car, pumping that thing, you got a lot more 85 running through that engine, obviously more of it's going to be potentially contaminating your oil. Here's the other side of that. You got to remember that ethanol is hydrophilic, meaning it likes water, as opposed to hydrophobic, which is gasoline or oil. It doesn't like water. So in this case, getting that contamination into the oil means that now that ethanol is going to be just looking for any moisture that can get in there. And again, that's going to have more to do with condensation and things like that as the engine is warming up. So it's another reason why you've got to get those things to operating temperature more often. If you're letting them sit, this is a problem again with cars running E85. So a number of reasons why you need to be changing that oil more often. Hopefully that illustrates just a few of the good reasons to switch them out. Real Counterfeit saying $1,100 water pump change. That's always fun. Let's see. We're saying I used to use those cabs in San Francisco all the time. Hell yeah. Loved him, man. Can't remember the guy's name. Not that maybe you do know, maybe you wouldn't. The guy had this fleet of those black town cars. And dude, they'd come get you, scrape you up, get you back home, man. I mean, dude, these guys are the shit. I can't remember his name. I feel like an asshole. Oh, man. Anyway, good old times, man. Doctor's saying Jesse's 4.6 stock as hell fast because he uses all the nitrous. Hell yeah. Chris is asking, B Mason, what would I need to do to turn my 6.1 into a fully built drag car that's on nitrous? Don't plan on daily driving it next year. Well, dude, where do you start? Obviously starting at the back of the car, suspension bits, BMR, trailing arms is going to be where you're going to want to start. Obviously, rear diff, just wait till it blows up, see if you need one. But I mean, you've got a Gatrag rear end setup. So, you're going to have that to contend with. Not necessarily that they're weak or anything. It's just that, not quite as strong, but they'll still hold up just fine. Drive shaft for sure, built transmission. And then from there, forged rotating assembly, cam of your choice, depending on which power adder you want to go with. But aside from the nitrous, but I would say a real healthy large cam, something in the neighborhood of about 240 on the intake, 246 on the exhaust. You're going to need to ramp compression up to about 13.5 or 14 to 1. Let's see. It means you're going to be running it on E85 or race gas. Extrude hone the intake manifold, larger throttle body will get you where you need to go there. And then, of course, after that, it's going to be all weight reduction. So stand key tie bars and collars, 3/8-inch push rods. Basically, give Doc Diff a shot and he'll straighten you out real quick as far as what all you'll need. But you're going to need to turn some significant RPM. And again, it just depends on, if you want to go all out race, maybe the Holley intake, again, you're going to need to make that thing turn some RPM, lots of spring, ported heads, the list goes on and on. So basically just literally just start throwing stacks of money at it. And that's kind of how it's going to go for you. But that's the way to do it. Nitrous works. Nitrous controller is also a good way to go with that as well. Slash saying, finally ordered a catch can for Scat Pack after 33,000 miles. Better late than never. Absolutely. Chuck saying, I run 5W20 Pennzoil full synthetic in my 5.7 Challenger. I just changed the oil and filter at 4,000 miles instead of 5,000 miles. Am I wasting oil? No, not at all. The reason why you're not wasting oil is, number one, I don't know how you're driving the vehicle. If you're beating the living hell out of it, then no, you need to maintain it every bit as harshly as you run the thing. If you're running in a lot of dusty conditions, obviously that's going to be a reason to change the oil more often. If you're running the car a lot for short trips, that is MIDA on your oil. You've got to be changing the oil more often if you're just making quick trips, especially if the car doesn't get to near operating temperature. If that thing doesn't see, say, 170 degrees for any real length of time, then yeah, you're going to need to change the oil. The condensation just doesn't have a chance to get boiled or burned off, however you want to look at it. So no, you're doing fine with that. You know, again, a lot of guys will say, you're just throwing it away. It's throwing away good oil or what have you. But look, if you plan on keeping that vehicle for any real length of time, especially if you rely on that thing to get you to and from work, I mean, what you mean, a little bit of peace of mind is worth that, believe me. So no, you're in good shape. Trust me. Let's see. Chris is asking, thoughts on my wheel and tire setup for the 6.1 Challenger running Raystar, 18x5 Mickey Thompson's up front, and 17x9.5 in the rear, Mickey Thompson Street SS. Not bad. I would say that that's a good way to go. As a matter of fact, my Recluse that I just picked up will be getting the 18x5s, the same that I have on those right back there. And then the ET Street SS is a good setup. I mean, you're a 6.1, you don't necessarily need ET Street Rs. ET Street SS will get you to the track and back very safely. Obviously, you know, rain notwithstanding, but they will absolutely work in that environment. So yeah, I'd say it's a fantastic setup, and I think you're gonna have a lot of fun with it. You'll have a lot of success with it. I know that for the Hellcat guys, I know quite a few guys that have run the ET Street SSs. You know, for a track tire, it's not anybody's first choice, but if it's a compromise of a tire, it's got a good soft compound and a tread that will, you know, at least help you go through some damp areas without too much drama. So I think it'll be good. Oh, Doc Div saying it's a relevant statement. Didn't mean to put it. No, it's all good, brother. Chris is saying also, B Mason, my full bolt-on cammed with 100 shot. Would it be worth it to run E85? The cost of the whole system in tune would be $1,200, by the way. Cammed with a buck, you know, yeah, kinda. Let me just say this. It depends on it depends on how aggressive you got with your compression ratio. You know, full bolt-on probably means you didn't do pistons and rods, so you didn't really ramp up the compression ratio that much. I don't know. I'm not sure that E85 would help you as much as you might think that it would. I mean, on the spray, yeah, it'll give you a little bit better margin in terms of detonation, may make you a little bit more able to run a little bit more timing. In that respect, it's worth it. But now you're going to have to start testing your fuel. And not that that's a bad thing. It's just a thing that you have to start doing when you start running the old Echo Ocho Cinco. So just know that coming into the conversation, that's where you're going to be. But yeah, no, you can definitely, yeah, $1,200, the whole system and the tune at 12 bills. I mean, you get an E85 compatible system and a tune. You know, obviously bigger injectors, things like that are going to come into play, but you can feed the fuel in through those injectors. Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, go for it. I guess the only reason why I've got a little bit of hesitation is it's wintertime. And wintertime is when E85 stops really being E85 and starts really being more E70. So if you're going to do anything with the car, now's the time on the E. Now's the time to do it while you've got crappier E85 that you're going to be working with. Typically, this will be the time where you're working with the worst quality E85, but unfortunately the absolute best in atmospheric conditions. So when you need the best E85, you're literally dealing with the worst E85. What a paradox, right? Anyway, just kind of a word to the wise there. Riff's asking, how long would it be okay to have one tank of E85 in my car as long as I started it every so often? I would say 3 to 5 months would be about as far out as I would let it ride. I know some will argue with me on that and they'll say, nah, 30 days or 3 months. Man, look, I'm pretty sure you could get away with modern fuel systems being what they are. I'm pretty sure you could get away with, 5 months and still have a serviceable fuel. Now, if it's carbureted, I wouldn't let it sit overnight. No, I'm kidding. Carbureted stuff, that's really where you're going to start running into problems if you start running the higher ethanol content and letting it sit. But realistically, modern stuff, modern fuel injected stuff, you'll be good for a little bit longer than you think. But here's the thing. You're going to need to burn it out of that car at about the 4 to 5 month period, though. Let's see. Riff saying, I filled my Hellcat with the 85 about 8 days ago, but still have not went through half of it. Oh, man. We've practically run them out of gas on the dyno. Jason's asking, have you surprised any cars with your Fox? I haven't seen many videos on your channel about it. The only car that I spooked with it was a wide body Scat Pack 392 car that I snuck around. He had nailed it, and I was kind of in this blind spot. And when I heard him go watt, I just grabbed forth and stood on it and basically just kind of went around him. But I had literally, I went around him just enough. Luckily, to prove a point, but then I completely ran out of gear with these 373s. But after that, no, because I grenaded the clutch in Foxy. And so, again, I need to find a shop I can get this clutch knocked out pretty quick. But yeah, love me some Foxy. Car is a flipping riot to drive. And I've already, I've done the some trim. I put the new gas shocks in the hatch, put new strikers all the way around the car, adjusted the doors. What else have I done? Because I can't do anything else. The car won't move. What else? Oh, a little white box that's sitting over here. Those are headlights. So that's what's going to be going on the car next, be a new set of headlights. Let's see. Riff saying, I had a random Fox body keep up with my 844 horse wheel torque and 818 wheel horsepower Hellcat the other day. Had no idea what he had done to it. It doesn't take much. Riff saying from a red light, or Jay saying from a red light. Chuck saying, I do rely on my RT to get me to work. I don't beat on it, but I do play. No, it's all fun. Riff saying no from a roll. Saying, let's see, Ray saying, what would it take to get a 392 to 500 wheel horsepower and pass emissions here in Georgia? Is it possible? Oh, yeah, totally possible. It's basically pick your cam. But cam, a good solid tune, long tube headers, high flow catalytic converters, metal substrate catalytic converters, ported intake, larger throttle body, Hellcat air intake with a Hellcat filter, or equivalent, and that will get you where you need to be. My white car passed emissions with no problems. It didn't have a cam, but if you put the right cam in the car, you won't really notice anything, and you'll still be able to pick up some pretty decent power. And as a matter of fact, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag as far as what Quick Brick's car just ran tonight. I was actually helping him. I'd remoted in and had made some changes to his tune while he was at the track tonight. If you're on, buddy, I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but that car freaking screamed tonight. So, and it passes emissions down here in Texas. So, just kind of give you an idea. But yeah, that car, it did what I was hoping it would do. It covered a number I was hoping it would cover. So, I'm stoked. And that's a 4,650 pound car. Kevin saying, hey, Mason, if you had to pick one, do you prefer the 392 feel or the hot rod small block feel? Also, with a 363 wheel horsepower and a Challenger, is a 4.50 to 60 possible? Oh, yeah, it's absolutely possible. I mean, yeah, especially with a tire, or certainly with a tire. Asking if I prefer the 392 feel or the hot rod small block feel. The thing is, that's almost a trick question because the 392 is kind of a stroker small block. I mean, it's a bored and stroked 5.7. So, you know, between the two, in other words, if you're asking would I rather have a 5.7 at or about the same power level as a 392, there certainly is more theater with a 5.7, especially when you're talking about having a cam and, you know, ported intake, throttle body, long tubes, and all of that. You're not going to get to the actual power level of that 392 though. The displacement and bore sizing and unshrouding of valves and all that. The 392 just has some inherent efficiencies that are playing in its corner, but 5.7 can be an absolute riot. So, you know, what would I rather have, one or the other? Man, they're both really good. I love the 392 because it's so snappy, down low especially. So you get kind of a big block feel out of the thing. So, which one would I rather have? I'll tell you what, a 5.7 with the Joker cam through Doc Diff, ported manifold, bigger throttle body, and long tubes will pretty much give any 392 all that it can handle, and it comes with a lot of theater as well. So, oh, did I get it? Oh, Skeeter. Die, motherfucker. Anyway, over under, I guess it's going to be 1. That's the only one I've seen so far. God, I don't know. How about a cam 392? That'll work for me. Let's see. Chris saying, my cousin has a 2013 5.7 Hemi and is discouraged due to the power as he only has an exhaust and intake. What would you recommend that he does? Well, I tell you what, I mean, sky's the limit, really. I mean, I'd go with tune or at least a pedal commander, get that thing to wake up a little bit. You know, possibly take a look at, you know, a full exhaust, you know, go with a set of headers, go with a different cat back. That's another way you can go. Again, you're going to need to get the thing tuned anyway, but those are going to be some areas that I would look at. It's what really helps to wake up those 5.7s. Let's see. Riff saying, I drove an RT Challenger and was really let down by the power. Maybe it's because I've only ever had SRTs and Hellcats, but it did feel slow. You know, the funny thing, then he goes on saying the stock 6.1 SRT, it was way faster than the newer RT, or at least it felt that way. The funny thing is I've seen them both line up. And the weird thing about if you've got an 8-speed RT versus the NAG1 6.1, the 6.1, because of the torque converter and the few other things that are in the NAG1, the 6.1 is plenty punchy. But just running everything off of the numbers, the 5.7 will give that 6.1 all that it can handle and then some. You know, I've seen video. I mean, oh, and by the way, typically the difference in power. So this is how it'll break down. Through the NAG1, a 6.1 will put down, say, 300 and like this is after a tune. And NAG1 will put down, say, or the 6.1 will put down somewhere around, say, 350 to the wheels, 353, 355. The 5.7, by contrast, will put down somewhere in the neighborhood of like 330, 340 at the absolute most, but say 333, 335. My old truck put down 333 on an 89 octane tune. So that'll kind of give you an idea as far as what they'll put down to the ground, you know, just engine for engine, trans for trans, which is typically what you're going to run into. But from there, you know, that 8-speed does a lot in terms of really waking the car up. But, you know, you've got a 309 gear in the Nag 1, and you might have a 262 gear in that 5.7. And so that's where things really get nutty, where that 8-speed kind of loses some of its punch compared to that Nag 1. So they can end up being fairly close. Smart money goes with putting a set of 370s or at least a set of 309s in that 8-speed 5.7 car. And that's when that thing turns into a lot of fun. Again, with the other bolt-ons, you don't even have to crack the motor, but just bolt-ons in general, wake the thing up, have a really fun car to play with. Let's see. Chuck saying, my RT Plus Shaker doesn't feel slow at all. The 6-speed manual makes it fun. Yeah, it does. And the active exhaust sounds mean. Yes, it does. Slime saying, I sold a Scat Pack and now I have an 18 Hellcat. You were absolutely right about the fun factor of the NA392. The snap is not there in the Hellcat, which makes cramped city driving actually more fun in the 392. And that's something I've been trying to say for 4 years now. And what's funny, here's the funny thing. So you've lived through that too, right? It's that snappiness of the 392, that dartiness of the 392 almost that the Hellcat just simply lacks. The thing with the Hellcat is the 392 it's like jabbing, you know, it's a real quick jab, and it will just want to pop itself like if you're in traffic, it'll want to pop itself into like an open spot. The Hellcat wants to blast through that open spot and end up like 3 lanes on the other side. But it doesn't get there like, boop, it just goes, and just makes this production out of it. It's hard to explain it. I cannot put it into words. You've got to drive one and then immediately drive the other to know exactly what I'm talking about. But for lack of a better way of putting it, I sound like Nana over here, but the 392 is just really zippy, you know, and the Hellcat is a beast. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it will absolutely truck where it wants to go, but because of the torque, especially on stock tires, it just spins the tires. I mean, it's again, the Hellcat is very lumbering in how it makes power. It makes a ton of power though, and it eats up real estate really quickly, but effortlessly, in a way that you just, again, my vocabulary is just too limited to be able to really describe the driving feel, you know, 392 versus a Hellcat. The 392, I'll put it to you like this, the 392 is more responsive, stock for stock, okay? The 392 is significantly more responsive from idle to about, and I'm going to use pedal here, not RPM, because our RPM is, you're getting a little bit too specific. I'm just talking about the subjective driving experience here. From basically idle to, say, 40%, 30%, maybe even half throttle, the 392 is much more responsive. Anything after that, the Hellcat will simply overpower the 392. But it does so with just in a big way. But up to that point, the 392 is actually a lot of fun. The fun thing about a 392 car is, and where a 392 car really shows its worth, is on the street. My perfect setup would actually, I hate to say this, you know, just for playing around on the street. I'm not talking about roll racing, because we ain't even going there with a 392. But where you can absolutely make mincemeat out of Mustangs, Camaros, Vets, or whatever, any garden variety Scat Pack. It can be a Scat Pack Core, my favorite. Scat Pack Shaker, very close second, what have you. Put the thing on a sticky drag radial. ET Street SS's work really well in this, but you can put it on a drag pack or, you know, an 18-inch setup in the rear with a set of ET Street R's. 17s do just as well. On the street, you can use every horsepower that you paid for. Every single horsepower that you paid for will be available to propel that thing forward. I'm reminded of Shalandra on a drag pack. I'm reminded of Ray's 1320, that Frostbite Blue 1320 that I freaking fell in love with. I never thought I'd see the day where I said that, but I absolutely did. And the reason why is it was so much fun on the street. We had more fun than you should ever possibly be allowed to have. Two grown-ass men with a combined age of probably, let's see, of over 100 years between the two of us, out there on the street, making hit after hit after hit after hit, and had all the fun under 120 miles an hour. But the car would get there very quickly, sounded amazing, responded very well, and we're running it at street pressure on those Nexen drag radials. And we're out there on the street running 12-second quarter, like low, like 12.1, 12.2. I was running 12.2, right around a 12.1. You win. But anyway, and props to him. He's been doing this for a long time. But, you know, pass after pass after pass, run after run after run. So much fun on the street. You can't do that with a Hellcat. The only time you kind of can do it with a Hellcat is if you run the DBRs and you're only going to get maybe 3 hits at the most, and then the tire's wrecked. You've got to rotate them to clean them up. So again, you know, a lot of times guys will say, well, what do you like better, 392 or Hellcat? Every 392 guy gets a Hellcat. Why? Because you always want more. And the Hellcat, from a durability standpoint, is the smart play. I mean, that thing is as built as you can really expect to get any street car. However, man, I've just had so much fun. Here's the problem. See, here's where the 392 cars get a bad rap. And I'm rubbing my face frustratingly because the 392 in this platform, it does such a great job, but the party is really over at 6,000 RPM. Where the Mustang, you can drag that thing into real deep water, 7,500 RPM. The 6.2 is like a 6,500 RPM engine. The 6.4 just won't spin that high, and it suffers from like roll racing, you know, that kind of stuff. That's not that car's wheelhouse. But again, it was never designed for that to be in its wheelhouse. It's the heaviest of the group, and it's the least aerodynamic. What do you expect out of it, okay? But from a dig and from just a playing around point of view, dude, you can't touch a 392 for that. So, you know, if I were to do it again, would I have gotten rid of Shalandra? Yeah, because I love me some Revlon. But I do feel like I shortchanged that package a little bit. Unfortunately, that's just the way it kind of worked out. But, you know, I had a lot of fun with that car. And because of that car, I can appreciate what this car can do. But yeah, I wouldn't mind having another one in the garage. Put it to you that way. Let's see, Ruth's saying my second 6.1 is a 6-speed and with just can tune, put down 383 horsepower and 383 torque. That's very common on a dyno jet. And guys, remember, when I'm talking about dyno numbers, I'm always referring to a Mustang dyno. So typically on the Mustang dyno, you're going to add about 10-ish%. And that'll get you to what a typical, like a 248 dyno jet would give you. Let's see. Oh, Kevin saying, when I asked you if you prefer the 392 or a Hot Rod 5.7, I was thinking that it would be nice if Dodge would go back to offering whatever you wanted over the counter, with the sky being the limit. So let me just say this: the problem with Dodge is that they don't have direct connection anymore. It kind of used to be like that. Now they do have the SCAT packages, which was, you know, a CAN tune, a cam, and a few other things for the 5.7, but they never supported the 392, which is a real drag. I guess no pun intended, drag racing. Anyway, it's a real drag because the 392 really is the flag bearer for the grassroots racer. And you see him at the drag strip all the time. I mean, listen, in the last 3 years, the drag strip has looked like a Mopar convention. I mean, it's crazy how many Mopars are at the drag strip now, and that's awesome. It would just be really cool if Mopar in general would resurrect the direct connection namesake. Give the 392 guys something they can work with. Intake manifold would be a big move for me, but intake manifold, camshafts, you know, rocker arms, all kinds of stuff you could do, and it's stuff guys would do to their cars. I just don't understand why they don't do that. Dealer optioned performance parts and all these things don't have to affect emissions capabilities. You know, cam might, but, you know, rocker arms wouldn't, you know, tie bars and collars from Stanke wouldn't. I mean, Mopar already offers their own tie bars, so I mean, there's that. But there's a lot of things they could do for that car that would really help it, but it's just a shame that they don't. Riff saying, to me, the 392 feels like it has a pedal commander on it compared to the Hellcat. It's a great way to put it. And the reason why it feels that way is, well, majority of that has to do with compression ratio and stroke. Obviously, the 392 is just a, you know, a stroker version of that 6.2, same bore sizing. But again, you're talking about 9.5 to 1 versus basically 11 to 1 with the 392. It is going to be more responsive, and it's going to be snappier, and it's just going to be more there all the time. So cars are a lot of fun. Let's see. Twan saying, hey, D, I have an 18 Challenger Scat. Just installed an MMX Black Mamba cam. Do you think I would benefit from a 1320 Scat torque converter? Yeah, you would benefit from that. I think you'd benefit a little bit more from something a little bit more aggressive. We were stalling the Scat Pack, or we were stalling the 1320 up to around 2,000 RPM. I think if you could drag that thing up to around 2,400, it'd be a little bit better with that cam. I think you could utilize it a little bit better. But yes, you would do much better with a converter with it. But you will need a lot of tuning to get it to work right. Kevin saying, Mason, if I get another car, it would definitely be a 392. But the thing is, I get the 8 speeds are better, but the deals on 392 5 speeds are super attractive, especially if you already have cam money. That's a good point. The original 392s, the ones with the power steering pump, as opposed to the electric power steering, were also NAG 1 cars. So good deal if you can find one of those. Be a good pickup for sure. Chuck's checking in saying, Merry Christmas, B, gotta go. Merry Christmas to you, Chuck. Thank you. Riff's asking, do you think the Hellcat motor is worth setting up for compared to just getting a crate red eye motor, which came out recently? Just get the crate red eye, dude. Seriously. So what do you get for your $22,000? Well, I mean, you get 1,000 horsepower, which is great. But last I checked, all the Hellcats were sold, and I didn't know if they're going to be making another batch of them or what. But here's the thing, the 426 with the blower and all that, it sounds good. It is cool, I guess. But listen, well, here's the good thing about the Hellcat. It comes with all the electronics, right? So you've got the tune, you've got everything you need to get it to work right. 426s and blowers are kind of hard to make gel in a lot of ways. primarily because you need so much capacity just to fill 426 cubic inches. But with all that being said, yes, the Red Eye is a great platform. It's a great place to start. There's a lot of guys that are going deep into the nines with those engines. There's a lot of guys going deep into the nines with just the regular Hellcat. So, I mean, there's that. So for me, the issue that I have with the Hellcat is I guess the question is it worth all the extra money? If they are making them now and you've got the cash to shell out, then yeah, I would probably say the Hellcat would be the way to go. But if you're on any semblance of a budget, and I mean, like if you don't have the money to just hand over like stacks of racks and go, hey, give me that engine and electronic package, Red Eye would be a lot better way to go. Plus, look, if you want to make more power out of the Red Eye setup, you just turn the boost up, because that's all you're really there to do with that rotating assembly, is to facilitate that compressor sitting on top of it. So, you know, you can always make a ton of power with either one that you're going with. Just depends on how much power you want to make, and depends on what you're going to do with all that power too. Let's see. 9X saying, I changed the O-rings on my fuel injectors on my 6.1, but I still see saturation at the base of one. Any tips? Also saying, should I put stickies on it? No. I don't really know if I've got any tips per se, aside from just making sure that they're lubed when they're installed. Make sure you don't have any issues with them in general. I would say that at this stage of the game, I would pull the injectors and have them cleaned. Send them to Fuel One. Give Keith a shout over at Fuel One. I'd start there, because you know, after about 6-7 years worth of use, about time to get those injectors clean. So just know that coming into it also. But that's what I would do. Ruth saying, Merry Christmas all. Merry Christmas. Let's see. Ruth's asking, do you know if Kevin Van Voris has stock internals in his Hellcat that he runs 8s in? A good question. I don't think so. I think that's a forged rotating assembly. I think it's an MMX bottom end. And Riff saying, I think that's how you say his name. It is. Slime's asking, do you use the taser for the lock and cooldown for your Hellcat, or for the line lock and cooldown? I do not use it for the line lock. I just foot brake it and power brake for the burnout, but I do use it for the cooldown, and I love it for the cooldown. Run it for about 10 minutes. Don't let it just sit there and run forever. It will eat a battery up if you're not watching out. Nonix is asking, should I put sticky tires on my ProCharge 6.1 with stock suspension, or would the same street tires spare my transmission and suspension? So, yes, street tires are the fusible link in any performance application if you're worried about durability long term. I'll put it to you like this. If you were to put real sticky tires on it, you're going to be coming up on what could be the limits of what your transmission will actually manage. But it's a ProCharge setup, so it's not going to be as hard on components as like a positive displacement supercharger or nitrous would be, especially if you're getting the nitrous out of the hole. But that being said, no, you'd be right to say that your stock tires would be your fusible link. Depending on how much boost you're running, I mean, basically depending on how much power you're making, you might not be in too bad a shape though. Just by putting like a drag radial on the back of the car. Typically, that's not going to be overkill if you're running the thing on the street. Now, once you start putting the thing on a drag strip where you've got a real sticky, very well prepared track, then that's where things are going to get a little bit dicey in terms of long-term durability for transmissions and things like that. But if you're on the street, don't worry about it. You should be good. Riff saying my Hellcat burn box, which is basically the same as a taser, kills my battery all the time when I use cooldown at the track. Yeah, I know the feeling. Riff saying I put some really sticky 17-inch tires on my ProCharge 6.1 Challenger and had no problem with the suspension so far. Yeah, I wouldn't think it would. Or the transmission over the last 4 years. Yeah, I mean, again, it just depends on really what all you're doing with it. But again, a ProCharger is going to be softer on parts. You got to remember you've got a raising boost curve. And I mean, look at it like this. If you've got, you know, at launch, if you've got 3 pounds of boost, you're doing good with a ProCharger. Whereas you're going to have 8 to 10 pounds of boost if you're running something like a Hellcat type setup. You know, obviously a positive displacement, but you know, if you're maxing your boost out at around 10 or 11 pounds, well, quite honestly, you're going to have about 8 or 10 pounds at launch, which is a significant amount of load on those parts. So just, ooh, Pepsi just about blew up. So just know that coming into it. All right, it's the bottom of the messages there. So anyway, getting back to the whole roll racing thing. One other thing that you've got to remember, tuning for roll racing. This has come up quite a bit. Yes, you do dial your tune back for roll racing. So one of the issues that you run into, and what guys don't understand, is cylinder pressure. Think of it like this. You've got dwell time under maximum cylinder pressure. Drag racing, you know, quick hits on the highway, you're not really going to be under high cylinder pressure conditions for extended amounts of time. All of that changes when you start to run 140, 50, 60. Really, once you start hitting that 160, 170, 180 number, this is where cylinder pressure starts to go up significantly because you have peak power. You still have the same amount of charge coming into the cylinder. You're still compressing it the same amount, right? But the amount of time that piston is at top dead center, and as it's coming down under even more load, is greater, which means that your boost number will actually go up. You can even see it in the KPA, which is the kilopascals. It's just a fancy way of saying boost. Atmospheric pressures, in other words, like bar, same thing. But you can see it even with a positive displacement supercharger. As the load increases and as that dwell time increases, the KPA goes up. It's actually lower in first gear than it is in second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and all the way up. Because, again, higher dwell time, and you've got, well, more resistance at that point. Because of that, you've got to dial that timing back. So let's say your car makes peak power at 25 degrees of timing. You're going to probably drag that back by 2 to 3 degrees, because once you get into the higher gears, that load, that mechanical load, that extra dwell time makes up the difference in the timing. So mechanical load artificially increases the timing because it is slowing down the process of the piston coming down, which means you're not hemorrhaging your cylinder volume. And that means that you have more time, tick-tock, for that flame front to propagate. So anyway, that's why you reduce the amount of timing for those setups. And so it's pretty funny. You might see a car, you know, a lower power car get around a car that's making more power, same type of a setup, where one is making, say, 15 or 20 more horsepower on the dyno. But the reality is that when you start getting into these higher speeds, higher load conditions, that particular setup could be overtimed for that load at that RPM. And not to mention, you got to factor in wind resistance, tire resistance, along with the gearing the gearing resistance and everything else, basically all your parasitic losses keep going up and up and up and up and up, again, that's going to lead you to have a lower timing value. So if you want to go out and do all these kind of fun things, please make sure that the tune is fit for that type of an environment. You'll need to let your tuner know, hey, I'm going to be out making these bonsai passes with this car. You know, obviously, you know, tuning the thing at, you know, tuning the car for just peak power may not be good enough. So just top tip for you guys that stuck around. Might just save an engine. Ask me how I know. Slum Q is asking, why don't you like to use the line lock feature? I don't like using the line lock feature primarily because working through the taser for all of that gets a little bit cumbersome. I have a 15, and so I can't use the single button feature because my steering wheel won't allow for that. My ECU just doesn't allow for that single button feature. The 15s don't do that. If they did, I would probably use it, but I just don't. The other reason why is just out of habit. I can, you know, click the thing over into manual, put my foot on the brake, go whop, 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 get the tires lit, and then let off, and I'm good to go. So I've been doing that for years and years and years, and, you know, never really needed the line lock feature necessarily. Although it is nice, don't get me wrong, and I played with it, but it's just faster and easier to do that. Not to mention, you got to remember, I'm typically data logging the car. So what I'll do is I'll run the taser on the cool down feature for, you know, however long I need to cool the car down for. And then once it comes time to, you know, get the thing basically coming into the burnout box just before it's, you know, I got a couple of cars ahead of me. I may pull that taser out and go ahead and plug in my my data logger, and then from there I just data log it. So that's typically how I'll do it anyway. Hilton Mode's asking, any way to run boost on a Ram and still get a few 100,000 miles out of the truck? Absolutely. The main thing is just to maintain the vehicle. I mean, that's running boost isn't really a bad thing. A lot of guys think it wears out an engine or whatever. It really doesn't. I mean, if that were the case, think of all the diesel trucks that run millions of miles. I mean, you have these things exploding just left and right. The fact of the matter is, if it's engineered and it's put together to have boost, it's going to be just fine. The tricks to that, though, are conservative, but not overly conservative. In other words, a tune that's proper for the application that the vehicle will be used for. Don't get greedy, in other words, with the tune. You'll be just fine. Run good fuel in it. Change the oil in it often. Change the oil in the supercharger often if you're running a centrifugal supercharger that's a standalone, that's not using engine oil for lubrication. Keep everything lubricated and stay on top of your maintenance schedule, and you'll do just fine. And that, again, that's the thing that a lot of folks forget, is that if you're going to beat on it, maintain the hell out of it. I've seen some vehicles that are beaten mercilessly that just keep going and going and going and going and going. Other cars that are baby but aren't maintained properly will fail far before that one will. So yeah, just maintain it. You should be in good shape. Let's see. Riff saying, I don't like to use a line lock just because it's easier to roll out the burnout with it. That's true. Say maybe if I practice with it more. Man, I got annoyed with it just by trying to fumble through and find it. I'm good to just go dink, dink, dink for my fans and call it good. Let's see. George is asking, on a tire that will hook on a scat, is trans and diff going to live under stock power from a 392? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, it'll do just fine. Don't worry about that. Slime's asking, for roll racing, do you want to dial back the timing a little more for peak torque? Just caught up to that one, I guess. Yeah, so, and yeah, you're going to dial back timing across the board. I mean, typically, like I say, if you're at, let's say in this case, 20 degrees of timing, you're probably going to pull a couple of degrees of timing out of it just in general for any of those high speed, prolonged runs. You always want to build your timing table, build your bathtub. And you guys that are into tuning know exactly what I'm talking about. But what it means, guys, is that let's say you're running 10, 12, 14, 16 degrees, but then you get into peak torque, it'll go 16, 15, 14, 14, 15, 16, 17, and it'll kind of build back up the timing from there. The reason why you want to pull a little bit at peak torque is that's your peak cylinder pressure. And you just don't need the timing. I mean, you can easily overtime an engine in those areas. So just know that coming into it. A lot of times you'll see a timing table will tabletop and then start climbing back up. That's the same as a bathtub. You're just kind of removing that steady arc. Typically, if you have a nice steady timing arc like that, it might mean that you just don't have enough timing here and here. You know, I mean, it's just the way that it works. You just don't ever really want to get super greedy in that peak torque area though. But the good thing is that with these 8-speed transmissions, you only see peak torque once or twice on the shift point. And then after that, it's always above it. So let's see. Slime's saying, I just assumed the line lock would make things easier and save on brake pads and brake dust. Not that much, not as much as you would think. And I'm still running the same pads on Revlon and no big issue there. But yeah, I mean, in general, it would save on it, but it's not a huge savings. Let's see. Raging Bull, is the trans brake on a 1320 worth it? Yeah, maybe. I mean, obviously on a drag strip it would be, but not on the street. You're going to shock the tires. They'll just light the tires up. Kevin's saying having a 5.7 talking about tip in torque is going to lead down a one-way street to an E-Force situation. That's one thing I won't forget that I've learned from you, and surprisingly, they're not common up here. I'll tell you what, E-Force kit with a 5.7, freaking love that setup. One of my faves. Riff saying, I have a 2015 Hellcat and my steering wheel allows for the single button feature. Here's the problem with mine. Mine is an early release. In fact, mine's birthday is November 19th of 2014. So the first run of 2015s, those buttons don't go anywhere, unfortunately. Riff saying, I bought the Z Automotive buttons. So did I. Let's see. Steve's asking, what's the best car to roll race? GTR, Viper, Vet, or does it just depend on the bankroll? It depends on what you're up against and what you want to do. Look at SRT Jimmy, for example. He has C6, base model Vet, which is by far my favorite, by the way. Wide body kit with Pro Charger. And it's 60 to 130 is in the high fours. I mean, that thing absolutely screams. And he's able to run in like the 1,000 horsepower class. I mean, a lot of money though. I mean, right? I mean, it's still a significant investment. Vipers, man, it's going to take a lot of convincing to get me to the point where I would agree with Vipers being good for roll racing. Although they're not bad, they do have their limitations. Part of that being RPM. But the other side of it is just packaging in general. They're good with a shot of dope, but you know, I'd prefer maybe something else other than that. A GTR, that's cash money, dude. If you've got that kind of paper, dude, that's pretty much the way you're going to want to go. But if you don't, you're going to want to go the Vet route. Vet does a lot of really good things. So, I mean, it's tough to argue against the Vet, but the big downside to the Vet is going to be traction, stability on the big end can be a little bit sketch, but I mean, I always had a lot of fun with mine. So, you know, aerodynamic, lightweight, things will absolutely haunt you to, there's there's a lot of folks that get spooked by vets because at 140 to 160, it's like there's no wind resistance in the thing. It just goes and just sucks up real estate, man. So there's that. They're just real slippery. So if I were to build one, I mean, a 5-liter would probably be just as good. Maybe a bit more stable than the vet, but either way, man, that would be a nasty setup. Rose saying, I've been beat by a lot of GTRs roll racing against him. Yep. That's what I was saying. A GTR built for roll racing would beat a lot of cars. It would beat most cars, as a matter of fact. Rose saying true. In fact, back in the day, so what you have to remember is the GTR picked up the torch from the Supra for the longest amount of time, man. I mean, 2JZ, pick your hybrid turbo, big injectors, shot of dope. So there was a lot of those that were running around that would absolutely scare the daylights out of you. All of them manual, most of them, I should say, manual transmissions. Couple of turbo 400 swaps, but for the most part, manual transmissions, and they were all unbelievably fast. So there's at least that to consider, where they came from. But LSY said there's a 1320 video with a red GTR that smoked everything, made like 1700 without the 300 shot. Yep. Slime saying all-wheel drive has got to be a big advantage for roll racing, especially at that power level. Yeah. And saying, yeah, it's less tuning to get it to hook good. That's another thing is when it comes to just a rear-wheel drive setup, traction is everything. When you start getting into those kind of numbers, so we get back into the roll racing thing, and then we're going to have to sign off because we're coming up on 2 hours. This has been a fun one tonight. But yeah, when you're talking about roll racing, modern roll racing, okay? So let's go ahead and wrap it up. I talked about some of the stuff I used to do back when 1,000 horsepower to the rear wheels was, holy mackerel, 1,000 horsepower at the rear wheels. Yeah, well, 1,000 horsepower to the rear wheels is basically like your generic like cover charge nowadays. Modern roll racers, guys that take this stuff pretty seriously. I mean, you've got the vets, which don't need as much power. They'll be in the 800 to 900 horsepower range to the rear wheels. But you've got pickup trucks making 800, 900, 1,000 horsepower to the rear wheels with turbo LSs. Obviously, the Mustangs are right there with them. Just pick a number that sounds big nowadays. 12, 13, 1,400 horsepower is not uncommon. Hellcats, we've had a couple of builds at the shop with, my cam and a couple of other, the stroker, big blower and everything else, 12, 1,400 horsepower, isn't uncommon, making 1,000 horsepower, 1,100 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. So you can see really the progression of how much faster these cars are, and now how much more important the tires are than they were back then. I mean, we'd get away with some things back then with, sticky street tires because we were starting the hits at 65, 75, but really for the big speed, 100 miles an hour. Now with the prolific 60 to 130, which is now the default race. I mean, you try to talk somebody out of a 6130 and they'll tell you to go F yourself. I mean, that's just, it's like saying, hey, do you want to race a third of a mile in drag racing? It's like from a dig, it's like, where are you coming? Go get lost. That's where we're at now. 6130 is the big thing, with some guys doing the 60 to 160, which is understandable. Some of the faster cars, I mean, you go, it goes to 130, right? So now that speed is starting to stretch out even farther. And again, they're getting there so much faster. 4 seconds, or 5 seconds, I should say, 5.5 seconds, if you're hooking, is screaming 60 to 130, but it won't let you run in the 1,000 horsepower class. They're already faster than that. So anyway, give you guys an idea as far as how fast some of the new stuff is and why tires are so important for these guys that are running those types of speeds. They need tires that are not only sticky, think of how hard this is. They need tires that are not only sticky, but that can handle the the loading that is going to take to accelerate one of these cars again from these 60 to 130, 40, 50, 60 miles per hour speeds. It's actually asking a lot of a tire. So let's see. Let's see. Oh, Ripped is asking, why don't you think they made any new GTRs with a manual? Either way, it has become one of my dream cars alongside of the C7 ZR1. Another good car. Not sure why they didn't go manual with that. Could have had something to do with just managing the power, being able to make the DCT style thing work. If you can make that thing work, it is superior to a true manual. So they figured out a way to make it work, and these guys are figuring out ways to make it work with these big horsepower. So, you know, I just wonder why the GT500 can't get there yet. Huh? Anyway, I digress. Guys, we are coming up on 2 hours. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with me. Couldn't do it without you. Love each and every one of you. Guys, we're going to send it. Don't bend it. Keep her shiny side up. And that is a wrap on this one, guys. Take care. We will catch y'all on the next one. That's a wrap. Adios.